All right, guys, and welcome back. I would like to show you guys some of the things that I do. Personally, I drive a lot of places and I don't get a chance to change my tools over from one car to the other. And I'm not usually worried about it because more than 90% of the time, it's very rare that I actually have a road issue where I actually break down. So let's talk about ways to prevent that from happening. The number one thing on the list, guys are going to say, well, Mike, I always check my oil. This is what you're checking. You're not checking the oil level. You should always know. I have 6 air-cooled cars. I know what the oil level is on every single one of them. I know where it's at right now. And when it gets down to the bottom line, before it gets to the bottom line, I like it in the middle between the lines or above that. Okay? Never above the top line, though. Okay? If it's above the top line, the oil can foam up inside the engine and start to cause issues. You could burn up your engine. It'll start leaking from everywhere. A lot of problems can happen from that, guys. So keep the oil between the 2 lines all the time. But that's not the real thing you're looking for, okay? This is where a lot of people make the mistake. You want to know what the oil level is, and you want to know if the oil level is going up. If your oil level is going up, there's usually only one thing that can cause that. And that's you're getting fuel in your oil from a bad fuel pump. I can't even tell you how many over the years. And people go, oh, well, you need a good quality fuel pump, German made. No, I'm talking about German made pumps back in the old days that we used to use only German made stuff, and they would leak too, and the oil level would go up. Brazilian made ones, I've seen it with China's, I've seen it with German made, I've seen it with Brazilian Brozol. I think this is a Brozol Brazilian on here, and I still don't trust any of them. Some guys will actually go with the electric fuel pumps. Again, I have seen plenty of issues from electric fuel pumps. I've seen tons and tons of it. I've seen so much of it that I've seen a lot more from those than I have with this. But if I check this, I know pretty much that I'm not going to have an issue unless it starts leaking into the crankcase. All right, so it's a good idea if you're going on a really long trip, bring an extra fuel pump with you and make sure that you have the proper one, because there's the one for the alternator and the one for the generator, and the difference is basically the height of the pin. Okay, so sometimes what I'll do is if I don't know which one it is, I'll bring 2 pins, a new pin and a new one with me, just to make sure, just in case it goes out. That's something you can change at any time. Very easy fix. But checking the oil level and making sure it's not going up. Going down, yeah, then okay, if I've got a leak, you might say, well, my car doesn't leak, so I don't need to check my oil very often. No, check it all the time because it might be going up. You get a fuel pump that's leaking into the oil, major issue, going to cause a lot of problems. The other thing that I do is this pressure side fuel line. Okay, I'm always concerned with my pressure side fuel line. It needs to have clamps on it. I don't care. This is not Chinese fingers. Okay, fuel line, you go, oh, well, it's braided, so it makes it stay on. No, it needs to have clamps on it. Okay, and without the clamps on there, if it gets just a little bit old, it can slide right off. Immediate engine fire. Okay, biggest reason for engine fires in a Volkswagen is old fuel line on the pressure side. Okay, a lot of people will tell me that I have this in the engine compartment that causes an engine fire. Never seen it before. I've seen clamps be loose coming off. I've seen the barb come out of the carburetor. This thing right here, that coming out of the carburetor slides out. No good. The one that's on that one is an MP carburetor, and they actually thread it in there. With these, what I'll do is I'll check them, pull on them a bunch of times. If I'm suspicious of it at all, I'll take some baling wire and wrap it around the clamp, and I'll tie it to one of these. Let me just show you. I'll tie it to one of these so that it can't pull out. It might leak a little bit, okay, which typically won't cause an engine fire. It'll just make it smell, and it'll give you a little warning check. Never a bad idea to keep a fire extinguisher with you, because some of this stuff just happens, okay? So I'll tie it to this one over here. Just wrap it around the clamp, through the little hole in the clamp, little holes in it, and then pull it over tight and wrap it around that. That usually will stop it from sliding out and then causing a huge fire. So, in the same note, I replace this fuel filter and this fuel line often. So what I do is I go on Auto Haus Arizona's website, because I know they have legitimate German fuel hose. That's what this is. If you can see here, it's got the writing on it. See the writing on it? It's real Continental hose. So I'll use this and I'll replace it, because number one, it's the correct size. It's supposed to be 5mm, not 1/4 inch. I've seen so many guys with 1/4 inch fuel line on their cars, and this stuff handles the heat a little bit better than some of the heat of the air-cooled engine, better than the standard like stuff you get at O'Reilly Auto Parts or whatever. So I always use this. I don't use anything else, and I buy it in volume. So you get like a meter at a time there. I get like 2 or 3 meters or whatever, 4 meters at a time of fuel hose from them. I also, at the same time, because they have good rates on these, I get a Continental belt from them, and they have these, the MP Pointless. This one's in a generic package, but because I don't like to carry that big cardboard thing that they come in, okay? So the MP Pointless, we're going to get into Pointless in a second versus Points, okay? A lot of guys will go, hey, you know, Points more reliable. Personally, I've had a lot of issues with Points, and it's not the points themselves, it's the condensers. So I stay away from them now. I use Pointless in all my cars, and the reason I use these is because I carry 2 of them. I carry one with me at all times. And this, if it goes out, see that Allen wrench that's in there? That's pretty much all you need, other than that and a little thing to connect the wires. Okay, you need like some sort of pair of dikes or something like that. I can do it with my pocket knife. You know, I can actually connect those little wire connectors with my pocket knife, okay? That's all the tools you'll need to change it. It can be done right in the car, bug or bust. You don't have to gap anything. You just put it in. If you're doing Points, typically I will take the distributor out so that I can twist it around to the proper area and get the point gap correct, okay? And you need more tools for that, okay? Well, typically all you need to do is change the condenser, and most of the time that's the issue. But to get to the condenser, it's on usually the back side of the distributor. Very difficult to get to. So carrying a Pointless and using Pointless is actually easier to replace on the road. And this is the thing is, people go, oh well, Pointlesses are expensive. You know, they're $100 for a CompuFire. Check Auto Haus Arizona for an MP. You'll be surprised how cheap it is. It's very, very inexpensive through their website. And especially, you know, where you got to pay is the shipping. So you order some of this, a couple of these, and order a couple belts, and get some of this, you know, Continental fuel hose. They have some other things, like I forget some of the other items. Look on their website. There'll be a ton of stuff you're going to order and make it worth your while. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. They're just actually very inexpensive, and that's who I use for stuff like that. So anyway, those are things I constantly am checking. I will bring with me the Pointless, an extra one, and personally, I haven't had to use that second one ever. But even if you go with a CompuFire, because you go, I want a better one, I want the CompuFire, carry an extra MP Pointless with you, just because you need it, just in case it breaks down, if you're going with the Pointless ignition. If you're using condenser points, always bring an extra condenser and points with you, because it's usually going to be the condenser, guys, and that's usually what it is. So that's where the issues lie today. Another thing you want to do to prevent engine fires is I always use a metal fuel line through here, because if it's the rubber hose against this exhaust, it's no good. If he just happens to get against that, it's no good. And then where this goes through the engine tin should be protected either with a grommet or with some of this hose. I'll slit the hose and then use some zip ties so that it protects it from rattling against the metal. And then that fuel line should go through and bend to the right of the vehicle. The right, bend just like my hand is, go this direction, and it should be clear from the exhaust. So when it goes through there, make sure it's clear from the exhaust and it won't hit, okay, the exhaust ever. There's no possible way. You can move it all around. There's no way it's ever going to hit the exhaust. That's another thing you want to check. And that will prevent a lot of the engine fire issues with Volkswagens. 99.9% of it, it's gone when you check all of those things, okay? The guys will tell me this is going to break and catch fire, and we've done thousands of these, thousands, never seen it. So if you want to comment that, that's fine. It just kind of gets me a little irritated because obviously we worked in VW shops, 2 VW shops in Riverside, estimated about 30,000 cars with these right here. Never seen one of these burst, never. And the other thing I do today, because a lot of these are Chinese, this one isn't. It's actually Heinz or Brosol, something like that. I don't remember. But what I'll do is I'll take it before I put it on and I'll wiggle it back and forth, the top and the bottom, make sure that the glue is on properly. That's the only thing really could possibly come loose, is the glue between the two. Haven't seen one break yet, but I always check it. So the other thing is throttle cable breakage. A lot of people have a lot of issues with throttle cables that break. What I will do is see this tube where it goes through here. On the other side of the fan shroud, on the back side of the fan shroud, I always put a hose clamp on that so that this tube cannot slide back and forth. It can only go as far as I'm moving it right now. That's it, a little tiny bit. Because there's a hose clamp on the tube on the other side so that it can't walk its way up. Because what happens when you're driving down the road, this tube will start walking its way up, okay, and that cable will start to rub on the tin that goes across the back. Okay, it's the front of the car, but the back of the engine. That tin that will on there, and that will break the throttle cable within no time. Also, it will cause the throttle to stick. So it's a real common issue with throttle sticking. Another thing is a good idea is to try and bend this tube, which I still need to do on this one. I haven't done. I usually bend this tube so that it's always in the center of the throttle cable, so that it's not rubbing on the edge. Okay, really good idea. If that will prevent a lot of your throttle cable breaking issues. On my bigger engines, I use a buggy throttle cable. It is basically the same size as because I have different spring tension. Okay, I really don't like this right here. That's gonna go. I'm gonna take the whole carburetor off, but I don't like that. It's got to be the proper spring or it's just no good. So, because all that extra tension, all those things cause the throttle cable to break. But on my other cars, where I have aftermarket carburetors, I use the buggy throttle cable, which is basically the same size as a clutch cable. Very large clutch cable, clutch cable size. They don't break. So I use those on those other cars because then I have less issues with throttle cable breakage. In fact, I don't even carry one with me on those cars because it's very rarely ever does it ever happen. So that's another thing you can do is use the buggy throttle cable. They're real thick, but make sure that it's still got a straight shot, because if it's rubbing on that fan shroud, it doesn't matter if it's a buggy throttle cable or not. If you don't clamp the back side of that tube, it's going to slide out. It's going to cause the throttle cable to break, regardless of which cable you have. Now on my 6-volt car, of course I have to run points on it. So Wolfsburg West, their points are pretty good for these. Got a little oil leak. Looks like my distributor's leaking again. Gotta get the proper O-ring on there. And I'll make sure that that's repaired. It doesn't usually leak any oil. So anyway, the other thing I do on these is on the 6-volt car is I will get a relay, a simple 6-volt relay, and use that at the starter to prevent having resistance between the starter wire, the switch, and back to the starter. Eliminates all the issues with starting these old 6-volt cars. Like a lot of times you'll turn the key on, turn it to the start position, and the car won't start. It won't even move. It won't even turn. You just turn it and nothing's happening. So I have another video on that. It's a little bit involved to do. It's not hard. It's very easy. But you just get a 6-volt relay from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. And you use the relay to take the load from going from the battery all the way up to the front of the car, the switch, and then come all the way back to the starter. Prevents this thing starts every time. You have no problems with this car starting. So on this one here, unfortunately, I do not have a fuel filter on it here. And because it has the original fuel line, I don't want to change the look of that. So I can't tell if this one's having a vapor lock issue, but I don't have it because it's such a powerless, gutless thing. It doesn't usually get very hot. So I don't have issues with vapor lock. Usually when you have issues with vapor lock, like I did on the other one, and that's one of the reasons I have that fuel filter in the engine compartment, is I can see if the fuel is boiling inside the pump. Most of the time your vapor lock issues are going to be inside the fuel pump. The pump is connected to the engine. The oil temps are very hot. It's transferring the heat to the fuel pump. Fuel pump gets very, very hot and the fuel inside of it boils. When it boils, it creates air. The air locks the fuel from being able to go through, because the pump will pump air easier than it'll pump fuel. So if the fuel is boiling and there's air in there, it'll try and pump air, and the fuel will lock itself in the line and it won't be able to come through. That's kind of how you explain it. But anyway, that's what vapor lock is. So some people will wrap their fuel lines. If you're having to do all that stuff, you're going to take a look at your cooling system, make sure everything's working properly. Or maybe you've got a lot of engine in a small car like this, like these old Beetles like this one. They don't have a lot of airflow. They only have these vents right here. And these vents were made for 36 or 40 horse. Okay, if you notice, the later models that had 1600s have deck lid vents. Okay, so the fans on the bigger engines, like your doghouse fan shroud and all that, suck a lot more air. Okay, and there's no place for that air to come from if you don't have more ventilation. So that's really see a lot of guys will put the convertible deck lids on the early cars to give them more air. Some of us will actually raise, just leave the deck lid about 1 inch from the seal, and that gives it more air to get in there to run cooler. It's because the air volume going in there. So if you've got a bigger engine and a smaller car, you've got to check all those things to make sure it's right, because you changed the engineering. This car was engineered for that size engine, and when you put a bigger one in it, it's not that you can't do it. It'll still fit and everything, and you put more air going through there, you may have to do some stuff to the ventilation to make more air be able to go into the engine. So anyway, those are issues that you might create and you're having a overheating issue because you've got basically that engineering changed. See these fuel filters, this is Melee. These were, at least they put their name on it. So it tells me that they might be a little bit better than the others, made in Russia. I think these are available on Rock Auto. So, like I said, when I buy stuff on those places, I'll try and order enough to make it worthwhile for the shipping. Other things they do to kind of prevent issues and are simple things like my wiring. Okay, all my wiring. Sometimes I have some issues because I've got the cars are old. Like, people go, hey, your brake light doesn't work on your bus. And well, that's because the ignition or the turn signal switch has a issue with the connection inside of it. And, that can happen. And I sprayed stuff in it and tried blowing it out, doing it a few times. Sometimes it still has issues, but like most of my wiring always works. Okay, one of the reasons is, see this right here? You get these on Amazon, all right? And if you're using crimp connectors on your wiring, I'll either use a crimp connector, like with this setup. I've done it before with dikes. I will not use one of those other multi-tools ever, because those multi-tools, they do not crimp wiring correctly. Okay, so either I'll use the sharp pointed dikes if I don't have anything on me. I'll just use these, the cutters, and just crimp it down really tightly with that. But I don't like to use those. I like to use this, because this here, when you put this inside of here, that thing right there turns it inside out. Okay, when you crimp it with that, and there is no way that wire connector can come off. Okay, so either I'll use that, or I'll use, if I'm in a pinch and I need it done and I don't have the correct tool, I'll use dikes, or I will use solder and shrink tube on everything. So like if I'm connecting two wires together, I'll solder the wires, I'll slide some of this stuff over it, and what you do with this is you just heat it up with a lighter, and it shrinks down over the wire and makes a permanent repair. So I'll use that on all my wiring, or like I said, I'll use these and use that tool. That's the only way I do it. Another thing I do before I start my car has to pass bulb check. That's what that is. Both those lights don't light up, your car is not passing bulb check, I don't drive it. I will find out what is the issue. Why are both of those lights not on? Okay, when my ignition is on. And then when you start it, of course, the lights should go out. If you notice this one here, you notice how it got dim? That's because this car's a 6-volt car and it has a 12-volt bulb in there. It's a long story. But if those don't go out when I start it, I'm not driving it. I'm making sure that's going to be repaired or fixed, whatever it is. I've got an issue. I'll check if it's the red one, first thing I'll do is I'm going to check to see if I've got on this car 6 volts or 8 volts or whatever when it's running, 7 volts or whatever. Make sure it's charging properly. If I've got an oil light on, obviously you're not going to drive the car, right? But if the car does not pass bulb check when you go to start it, here's the issue. Let's say you've got an alternator and you turn this to the on position right there, and the red light for the generator, sometimes people have them backwards, so you might have, I've had that happen before too. So that's why I said if both of them don't light up, I'm gonna find out what the issue is before I drive it. Okay, if that generator light is not working, your generator, your alternator will not charge. That is the way that it energizes it. So if you fire up a car with a generator or the alternator and you run it for a minute and that bulb check never came on, okay, you're going to have a discharging situation. The alternator will not charge until it's energized. And it's energized through that little bulb. It's crazy. I don't know. That's just how it is. Okay. So what we've done before, let's say I'm on the road and my light bulb goes out for my alternator, and I have an alternator in my car. I can go out to the alternator while the engine's running and jump from the positive to where this light is, I'll show you. So I've jumped from, while the engine's running, jumped from here to there for a second, okay, just to energize it. A little bit of power from here to there, and all of a sudden you'll hear the strain on the belt because it's charging, okay. It will not charge if that a light doesn't work, okay. I've seen tons of people replace an alternator thinking that the alternator was bad, and there was nothing wrong with the alternator. It just was the bulb. The bulb was not working. They didn't check when they turn it to the on position. You know, that light has to work. If it doesn't, then this thing will not charge. So I would just jump from here to there for a second, just a little zzz, and then that's it. It'll start charging. So if you're out somewhere and you notice it doesn't pass bulb check and you're trying to get home, give it a little jump and it'll probably start charging enough to get you home. But then check that bulb and replace it. So the problem is a lot of parts stores don't have those bulbs. So you got to do what you got to do, okay? So you need to know if it doesn't pass bulb check, it needs to, and make sure it does. Now you'll notice that all of my cars have good engine seals. And there's no gaping holes in the back of my engine tin, all right? Those things make your engine run hot, okay? I'm not talking about like this. There's a little area where it's not quite covered, all right? That's not a big deal. Or around here where there's a little gap, okay? That's not a big deal. It's like when you have those big holes from your tubes coming down, or your air intake is missing and there's a giant hole right here, or you don't have this whole tin piece in here, or this gasket is gone. That's going to make your engine run hot, because all the hot air comes back and goes right back and gets sucked in through the fan and goes through the engine, gets sucked in through the fan and goes through the engine over and over and over and over, and just gets hotter and hotter. It's like a hot box. It's not good, guys. That's a good way to burn up an engine. So simple things like that, always make sure it's right, okay? Always make sure you have the proper stuff on your car, all right? That's all I can say is knowing what the proper things are. Another thing I was going to say, I forgot to mention, is this pulley right here. I've seen a lot of these break. People go, God, those pulleys are garbage. No, it's because there needs to be 9 shims. 9, not 2, not 3, not 6. Okay, 7 I've heard will work, but there should be 9. That means on this side of the pulley and between the pulley, all together, you need to have 9 shims. If you don't have the 9 shims on there, this pulley will crack. It's engineered that way. It needs to have that many shims. I have no idea why. Maybe it's the threads of this. We've tried to figure out over the years, but I don't know why. But if it doesn't have 9 shims, this sucker will crack. So make sure when you do your belt adjustment, you take this off, you take the middle piece off, you count all the shims. If there's not 9 in there, buy some. Cheap investment to stop you from having a road problem. You know, belt will come off. Bad day. And again, another reason to have that generator light working, even if you have a generator. If you don't have the generator light working, you don't know what the fan is missing. It's really hard to hear. I can hear mine, but you know, I'm always listening for that stuff. But on that truck, you cannot hear the engine, so yeah, it has to be right. So these are what the shims look like. Should be a total of 9 of them. Some will be in the middle, some will be on the outside, but you have to have 9 or it just will crack the pulley. I remember back in the day saying a guy said, well, I use those German pulleys and I've replaced 6 of them. Well, how many shims you got? Oh, I got 6 shims. It's like, dude, there's your problem. He's like, what? No, it can't be. That's no way that. Don't argue with the engineers. They knew what they're doing. 9 shims, okay? Then you have no issues. All right. So I think that settles a lot of the issues. I mean, those are the most common things that I see every day, over and over on VWs. that guys do that it's just a simple thing that they miss, and then they're on the side of the road going, hey man, I don't know what's going on, my car, it doesn't work, whatever. And typically, I mean, you gotta say you're not gonna have any problems. I mean, they're old cars, you can have issues, they're gonna have problems, but you're gonna limit them down to, I mean, when I drove these as a daily driver, if I stuck to those rules, I had a lot less problems. I could, like this thing here, I could probably drive as a daily driver. It's super reliable. I just get in it, drive it. Never have problems other than, checking the points and making sure that they're not getting closed. Checking the timing. Well, I look at the timing and the dwell. Okay, having a dwell meter is really important if you're using points. And just check that dwell. See if it's at 45. It's starting to head towards 50. Your points are getting old. Time to replace them. And keep that extra condenser with you and the tools to actually replace them on the road. So, like I said, I can do that with my pocket knife. Kind of hard to get the condenser off with my pocket knife, but because I have, a Swiss Army knife. This is the Volkswagen Guy's tool of champions right here. That you can fix a lot of things with one of those. Be surprised how much stuff you can fix with it. When it's the only tool you got, you figure it out. I like the bigger ones with little pliers on them too, but I don't have one of those. My mom bought me that one for when she went to Switzerland, 25 years ago or so, and that's the one I carry. So anyway, that's it for that, guys. These can be pretty reliable cars if you just take care of them, but there's still issues. I mean, they're old. The engineering concepts and everything are very, very old. You can update some of that stuff. Oh, one more thing I'm going to say. A lot of guys are switching to these, and there's a concern because Bosch ignition parts are no longer available. Okay, whatever's out there right now, that's what we've got, and the coils are already gone. So getting a good solid Bosch coil, the reason that the Bosch coils were better is because the Bosch coils had a resin inside the coil, and because the coils are upside down the way they're mounted, if you notice on a American car, the coils are mounted opposite the Volkswagen are upside down, and because they're oil filled, all the other brands are oil filled, what they'll do is they'll start to leak. And they'll usually give you a warning, so make sure you keep an eye on that. All right. But a lot of us are going to these type of ignition systems, and if you add up the cost, set of wires now for the stock wire sets are really not cheap. They've gone way up in price. The cap and rotor. By the time you buy cap, rotor, and wires for a used 009, you're going to be into it about what you're into this. This is about $200. Okay, so this Pat Downs makes these. Also, CB Performance does. They're exactly the same. Like people go, oh, they're not. No, they're exactly the same. Okay, same ignition parts, everything. But if you're gonna get one of these, okay, a good idea to order an extra pickup coil. So the wear part on these is right here. If you see below here, that is the pickup coil. All right, that's not, this here is the coil pack. I believe these can be interchanged. I heard they're a General Motors part, but I'm not sure. And less often you will find one of these go bad than you will this part right here inside the distributor. And you're not going to go to any parts store on the road somewhere and pick one of these up. This looks like a General Motors. I don't know, but it looks like one. Out of a, I don't know if, I wonder if that's the same. And I've been trying to get a hold of them to find out if that pickup coil interchanges with anything that you can get at parts stores. But they do sell these. They're like, I'm going to say like 35 bucks-ish, something like that. CB Performance sells them. Pat Downs sells them. I don't see them on his website. You have to email them to get a price or whatever and get one of those and get an extra one of these. All you have to do is take the rotor off. You can get a screwdriver in there and change it. Very easy to do on the road. So these are not bad. These are actually a good alternative because like I said, we are not going to have Bosch ones much longer. It's just whatever supplies out there is out there. And when we're running out and guys are going, oh, I'll just buy $200 for a coil. It's like, really? Come on, you guys. This actually works better. This is going to give you a hotter spark. You could increase your gap on your spark plug and actually probably get a little more performance out of your engine, and it'll burn cleaner. So I don't see how this would be wrong. So even if you're going on group drives with your buddies and all that, and some of the guys are going to have one of these, so have an extra one for someone. You know, spend the $35 and just have an extra, and that will probably solve 99.9% of the problems. If it doesn't, either these work or they don't. Okay, and there's no way to really easily test if it's the coil or the pickup coil, but I'm going to say more than 90% of the time it is going to be the pickup coil that's going to go bad, just from experience with all makes and models cars. I mean, I don't know. That looks to me, I don't know what this is. Maybe somebody knows in the comments. Is that General Motors, the top? Looks to me very much like one that came off of, and I haven't compared it to it because I don't have one, is the old Iron Duke. And they just changed the bottom of it. But if that's the case, then it might be an easy fix to buy at the parts store. I don't know. So, but this is the new technology. This is what everything's going to be pretty soon. Unfortunately, because the other stuff is just going away. And that's what we have left. All right. So that's it for this, guys. I hope this helps you. I'll talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.